Hello, John. Thank you for coming back to the show here.
Thanks for being thanks for being there, and thanks for everybody being here now on the show.
So I just want to remind the audience that we're live streaming on YouTube and simulcasting on X Spaces. If you have a question, if you have a question, please type it in the chat box or join the X Spaces and just ask for the mic and you'll be able to ask your questions live on the show. We will also repeat this show on all the channels. So if you miss the live show, you'll be able to watch at your leisure. But before we start, please click the link that's in the description box. That will take you to John's website so you can sign up for periodicals and for readings. In addition, please share the links and hit the like button. So, John, let's begin with Ukraine.
Yes, I had done something new for my Hogue Prophecy report that I hadn't done before a few days ago. I had, rather than write a whole magazine, as the Hogue Prophecy report is kind of a zine or an e-magazine, electronic magazine, fully illustrated. My subscribers got a three-page uh, sending that talked about an imminent emergency that was in the air around Friday. That the and even though the mainstream media, including in Kiev, does not inform the people what was going on, is the Le Gobelin Vert, as some of us call, Alex Christopherow calls him from the Duran, is the nickname we give the Green Goblin in French for Zelensky, Volodymyr Zelensky, the coke snorting um, president of Ukraine. Uh, and it's not something I'm making up here. One time when he was higher than a kite in the presidential office, it must have been late at night and all, and he was really gone. He was he was sitting in his swinging chair and he's saying, I like this and I like that. And then he spun the chair and then he kind of went, oh, like this. And he was kind of channeling his former comedy mode. And he was high as a kite on coke. And the other reality is, and I have that footage. It's on X too. They tried desperately to get it off, but it was too late because he sent it off himself. Um, the other time was when he was sitting in a train saying goodbye to uh, the Chancellor of Germany, Merz, the Prime Minister of UK, and the President of France, Macron, and then the other fellow of UK. Well, it's almost not worth saying his name because he's probably going to be soon gone from being head of Labour Party and Prime Minister of England, Keir Starmer. So anyway, the press innocently barged into the little room where they're all meeting. They're having a little party before the train would take them to Poland because they can't fly in and out. And suddenly, all the folks, Macron was trying to put his hand near this a little snorter spoon that was left on the table, and he also was trying to hide a pack of snow, of cocaine snow, with his hand. They all looked like kids being caught trying to smile their way through it. Merz tried to hide the little snorter spoon. And Zelensky was there too, so they were snorting up with coke. The president of France, the prime minister of the United Kingdom, and the chancellor of Germany, and the president of Ukraine. So caught red-handed. So anyway, so it's an interesting time we're having these days where we have so many people with either doing things with their minds with drugs or having cognitive decline in high, powerful places during the time of potential well, this World War III, which has been going on now, we're in this fifth year since its conventional phase began. Uh, we are just, I don't know if there were that many coke snorting leaders of the free world or the Axis forces in World War II. But I know there's certain documentaries that talk about High Hitler because of all the drugs that Dr. Morell was pumping him with to keep him going um, when he was starting to get his Parkinson's disease. So they say that Hitler was often really high as a kite as well. And so anyway, that's a little divergence. So uh, that's the kind of person we're dealing with who's president of Ukraine, or what I would call the front man for the real power behind him off camera, which is the neo-Nazi movement of the Banderite fascists who really run Ukraine's government. The so anyway, here we were at Friday, and there was this Zelensky was openly threatening, which was not noticed or allowed on Ukrainian TV. A lot of my Ukrainian contacts were thinking that Vladimir Putin would just made up this threat that he was going to bomb Ukraine's government district. But the real story is that Volodymyr Zelensky actually said to a number of people who were going to be guests at the um, the Red Square 9th of May celebration of the great victory of the Soviet Union against Nazi Germany, alongside with the Allies in the West. But really, the Russians did the lion's share of the fighting and the dying. We lost 400,000 casualties. The British lost maybe 500,000, 600,000. The French lower than that. The Russians saved the world from Hitler more than anybody else, and the cost was 27.5 million Russian citizens of the citizens, 190 ethnic groups, that is, of the Soviet Union. They were the ones that went into Berlin. They were the ones that finished off Hitler. And this is just the reality. And the story is that the Allies on the 8th, you wonder why we celebrate in the West the VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, on the 8th. It is because of a snafu that happened where they just decided to all force Germany to surrender when there really wasn't the right Soviet representative in the decision to make that decision. And so basically, the Soviet government protested and said, look, we weren't there. It is not yours to sign off the end of the European theater of World War II without us, who have suffered the most and fought the most. I mean, you Americans are lucky you didn't get a single shot from Europe. And your industries, and when your industries are so easily able to become the arsenal of democracy because you were not under fire, our industries in the Soviet Union were under fire. And under fire, the Soviet people dismantled 600 factories and dragged them over the Urals and rebuilt them in Siberia. And we were able to match your production where you had hardly a shot fired at you. We were under fire and we matched your production. 30,000 planes a year, 10,000 tanks, all of that. So under fire. When our cities in the western and cities on the west side of the Ural Mountains were afire, when we were fighting at the approaches of Moscow, Stalingrad, the siege of Leningrad, where 1 million of our citizens starved to death in the siege. Hitler decided just to starve us out, and we fought and we won this thing. So I'm just giving you this overview because it is very important. So the Soviets then they had an official signing that happened on the 9th, where all the allies were together and they got it right, and we really should all be celebrating. the 9th of May as the VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, because it included the people from the East that did most of the fighting in Europe to take out the evil of fascism. And now fascism is back. In fact, the Banderite Stefan Bandera was a contemporary of Adolf Hitler, and he was the founder of OUN and the what led to euphemistically called extreme Ukrainian nationalists, but in fact they were fascists. And they use a lot of the same Nazi symbols and all. In fact, of all the allies of the SS, the Nazi SS, the closest ones, the ones dearest to them as almost equals, were the Ukrainian SS soldiers. Latvians were third in the Baltic states. In fact, they still dress up in SS uniforms in Latvia and goose step up and down the parks in celebration of National Socialism. That's, you can find it. They still do it. And if you look and type in on YouTube and others, you will find the same torchlight parades of Nazi Ukrainians that still happen to this day. So that's an important backstory that you will not often hear on your mainstream news in the West. That this is why this war is existential to the Russians, because they fought Nazis before who wanted to take them out, who tried to bomb Moscow. And Zelensky said to these people, so there was a king who was part of the leaders of the Confederation of Indonesia, who he associates with, and he told the king, there's several kings of different regions of Indonesia. He told that king that, oh, don't go to the 9th and be there in Red Square. And he leaned in and said, it might not be good for your health. So he was very much wanting to send hundreds of drones against Moscow and have with a red square with all the thousands of people watching, the veterans and the soldiers marching with bands, try to drop some drones and kill a bunch of people on camera. That was his aim. So what happened was TASS and the official press of Russia and the spokesperson for the Russian president and the government, Zakharova, she and Peskov, they made it very clear that they said they started on the 6th of May to say notices to all the embassies in Kiev, foreign embassies, they say. It is time for you to evacuate your families and your office fellows and get out of Ukraine, get out of Kiev, because if we are attacked on the 9th, we will respond on the following day or two with a level of devastation that we have never unleashed before. And if you stay, you will be casualties of this. We are going to attack the government center, national government centers, its buildings. Perhaps that would include the Rada, the parliament, the presidential palace, and all the ministries, especially the SBU, the secret services. And they were closing, and in the east of Volgograd in the Russian steppes, there's a large area where the Russians test their new hypersonic missiles. And whenever they're going to launch them or fire them in anger, like they have twice before in this war, testing their newest things, like the Oreshnik, the hazelnut, they close airspace over a vast area of that part of the central steppes, and they were doing it right after this warning was delivered. The airspace was verboten for any people to fly over. So they were already gearing up and ready to go. And what I think they were going to do is launch not one, but several Oreshnik Mach 12 missiles that cannot be shot down. They are kinetic missiles. They have six major um, uh, MIRVs, smaller warheads. And now, from what see for they shot them first at Dnipro back in 2024, the first one, and then they fired another one west of Lvov, and it was strange because it was even faster. It was the other one was Mach 10. I could see the lightning. They came when you've got warheads coming out of space coming towards terminal velocity, they are flying at Mach 10 to Mach 5. That's 10 to 5 times the speed of sound. And they are literally aflame like a capsule coming back into space, like Gemini or Apollo or this most recent Artemis capsule, blazing as they come back in because they're flying so fast. And but the second wave that they hit a number of targets that were far away from the main target because now they have retro rockets. They have rockets on the ends of these MIRV, they're like cones, with high tungsten heavy metal center, which it's kinetic energy. It's not a nuclear bomb. It's not really conventional either. It's a whole new order of weaponry that is not radioactive, but can do damage like atomic bombs. And so when the first time they came in, I've done this demonstration before, they come in like the reason why they're called Oreshnik is because they come in like these long flaming streaks out of the sky. And if you've ever seen a hazelnut tree when it has its ganglia of flowers developing, they hang like that. So that's why they call it the Oreshnik, because of the way um, hazel flowers hang on a vine. So they come in like going woo, 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 woo. There are 36 of them. Those small bomblets then release smaller bomblets that are 36 warheads traveling at the first at Mach 10 into the Dnipro underground missile factory, uh, where they dug 4 levels deep into the very bowels of the underground missile factory. And you wouldn't see much damage from the outside, just the little holes where they went through. But when they opened up inside to see what was left inside, it was ghastly. There was nothing. So the underground missile manufacturer, which by the way were guided by a lot of German engineers who shouldn't have been there, was all turned to dust. And so So I imagine that the deep underground bunkers that are underground all the government buildings that were to be targeted were also going to dig deep 4 or 5 levels down and take those out too. And so and then when the second time it happened, they were even fast. Rather than going woof, woof, it was like woof, woof, oof, like that. Mach 12. You can watch it, go on X and say, spell out Oreshnik. You can see CCTV cameras in Western Ukraine showing them coming like, they're like lightning. They go like that. And they destroyed a huge factory. They destroyed a natural gas reserve underground bunker of gas, which also had 30% of the European gas stored in it with the Ukrainian gas, natural gas. And that glowed and fired for a long time after. So the Russians got in contact with Trump and his cabinet, and with briefly talking to the president, for the President Trump immediately called Zelensky and leaned on him hard. He said, "You're not going to fire anything at Moscow. You're not going to fire anything at Red Square." And so Le Gobelin Vert, the green goblin, relented. And this is actually good news. This is I have so few times to give you good news. And this is actually very good news because one of the greatest dangers of this war is in especially in the Ukrainian front of this world war. There are now actually the Ukrainian front and the Persian Gulf front, the Western Asian front. There's also the Sudan front and a new front erupting in the Sahel, where a lot of the Sahel countries are fighting terrorist organizations that are trying to overtake Mali in the central part of the Sahel. And the Russians are there. The Wagner battalions have now become full contracted Russian soldiers, and it's now called the Russian Africa Corps. And they have been training the Malinese and Burkina Fasans and the Nigerians to wage war against these American-backed, European-backed, uh, Salafist, uh, Islamic fundamental extremists that are trying to take over Mali and this is all kind of a run to eventually take over the whole area there and gain back the yellow cake uranium that now the Nigerians now they used to it used to be something like $250 a pound or ounce of I might get that wrong, but um, the Nigerians, this classic way the West handles the colonies and the colonists. The French used to come in and grab that same amount measurement for $25 when it should have been 250. And just ripping it off from the people who are digging it, their resources, their reserves. This is the reason why in 1953, the Iranian people rose up and chose a prime minister, elected a prime minister to nationalize Iranian oil because British Petroleum was doing the same thing to the Iranians, giving them, oh, here's your penny, and then we make all the profit off this. And they say, no, this is our resources. So they stood up. They were one of the earliest people to stand up against that. The British went crying to MI6, and MI6 went crying to CIA in the United States. And the two of them conspired to do a violent overthrow of Mossadegh, who was the prime minister, who was really giving back the people their resources. Uh, and they overthrew him. The Shah, who had been kicked out, was then allowed to come back, Reza Pahlavi, and he, with the help of Mossad, Secret Services of Israel, and the CIA, trained, uh, and these were Israelis that used to fight in Irgun, which was a terrorist organization bombing people in Transjordan before it became Palestine. A lot of these people had survived the concentration camps, and they learned a lot of new tricks of cruelty and to use upon people, and they knew what it was like to be under the boot of the Gestapo, the secret service, the secret police of Nazi Germany. And so what they did is their goal was to create a new form of the Gestapo that was even worse than the Nazi Gestapo. In Iran, it was called the Savak. And they terrorized for the next 27 years the Iranian people like they were under occupation. And that is why, folks, that is why in 1978-79, Iran rebelled and overthrew the tyranny And it was first a secular religion. It was a secular uh, revolution, that is. And then a lot of the people wanted to have more religion in their life and not be a secular nation. So it became the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, a lot of people still feel really angry in America about how for 444 days the American embassy people were under hostage by the Iranians. It might have been a mistake to do that because of they're still wanting to destroy Iran to this day for that. But what the Iranians exposed was when they got in there, they actually painstakingly took all the paper shredders, because in those days you only had one line paper shredders. So they had a whole team of men and women revolutionaries repaste together all the papers that had been shredded. And it's very clear how the United States was completely involved with Savak and completely involved with the terrorizing of the Iranian people for 27 years. So, that's a side you're not going to hear. And if you don't hear both sides of a story, and you don't have to agree or believe anything I've just said about all this in the last 10 minutes, but I'm provoking you to check it out yourselves. Because if there's anything that is most dangerous about this Third World War, as it's been foreseen, like with people like Matthias Stormberger back in the 1790s, who had remarkably accurate prophecies about World War I and II. And why should that change with number three? His most threatening forecast, he said that when the Third World War happens, in one morning, more people will die in this war than all the wars that were ever fought. He said that people, the human beings, the people of the world will walk with their eyes open into these catastrophes. Now, contemplate on that vision. Why would people walk in complete surprise into a catastrophic war that destroys civilization? They walk into it with eyes wide open because they were not informed. You are not informed, you of the West. You do not know the backstory. That's what I try to write about in my Hogue prophecy reports. The context, the background. If you're to know the blow of the future, you can only do that by knowing how you got there. And by knowing how you got there and how your governments are not telling you how you got there, really, you will be those people walking with your eyes wide shut to the dangers. You will be the people in governments in the West, and especially in Europe, who every time the Russians show incredible restraint, like when they took drones and started bombing Russian strategic bombers in three different places across Russia. The Ukrainians did this. When they started to use long range biplane drones to hit these huge radars that are the early warning radars, so that people of Russia can see over the horizon to see if somebody is taking missiles and attacking them in a surprise attack. Now, I grew up in the first Cold War, which ended in 1989 with the collapse of the Soviet Union, which followed not long after in 2014, the second Cold War, which I predicted in my writings would be short and end in a hot war, which is since February 2022, we are in. It's a world war. Finally, after all these years, I'm noticing in the mainstream media, a lot more people are finally embracing the reality. Just like it took time for World War II for people to embrace the reality that this was not just a bunch of flurries of wars. This was a world war. They didn't know, they didn't think that back in 1939. It took 2 years and a few months into the war before people in 1941, the end of it, called it a world war. Well, we're having the same delay now. Things repeat themselves, especially if things are done unconsciously. Unconsciousness is very predictable. Intelligence, enlightened people are not predictable. They are spontaneous in their intelligence. Intelligence is always spontaneous. And like the spontaneity of an innocent child is its foundation. So, so there were many times when the Russians, what did the Russians did not react like we would have reacted in Cold War One because that was started World War Three. They're really, we're looking at leaders in the West, Biden and now Trump and now the European leaders as people that have gone mad, that have been openly talking about using nuclear weapons. Even before this current war started, the Secretary General of NATO was openly saying, "Oh, why don't we just go from one and jump to 10 and just take a nuke and knock down all the Russians converging on the Donbass region to protect them from the Nazis who were trying to ethnically cleanse them out. Let's just drop a bomb on them." Now, if you said that in Cold War One in the 80s, let's say, you'd be carried off in a straitjacket, but not now. If Zelensky in February 2022 in the Munich Security Conference had said in the 80s what he said then in 2022, what he did is before everybody with the Vice President of the United States, the lady who shall never be president, they were all looking with smiles. Nobody was grabbing him because he was saying, "You must give us nuclear weapons. We had nuclear weapons when the Soviet Union collapsed. You must give those to us now so we can drop them on the Russians." Now, he should have been pulled aside and like, "Look, you know, what you're saying is crazy, and you cannot say that." And they would have, but what were they doing? They're all standing there and going, "Oh, that's nice. Isn't the Green Goblin a nice fellow?" He's just talking about, and he's also lying. Those nukes that were in Ukraine were property of the Russian Federation, which was the federal body that took over from the Soviet Federation, Soviet Union of Socialist Republics. And even the leaders of the West that preceded these people made it very clear that those nuclear weapons did not belong to anybody but the Russians. And thank goodness, because now the way Ukraine is, they would be armed. They would be arming fascists. Hitler would finally get his bomb in spirit. So that, thank goodness that didn't happen. So anyway, I found out that it was Putin, the president of Russia, watching Zelensky say these outrageous things. And he was not so much about this idiot that was saying them. What terrified him was that the leadership of Europe, all arranged there, were all going, "Yeah, yeah, let's give them the bomb." They said these are children. These are man children and woman children leaders. They have the immaturity of 7-year-olds. And it was actually that moment where Putin and his Security Council said, "My God, we're going to have to go. This is now becoming an existential crisis for us. We're going to have to step into this thing that we've been trying to stop for in Minsk One and Minsk Two, and trying to negotiate a peaceful end to the civil war that the fascist Ukrainians were fighting with the Russian Ukrainians, who were their victims." And that moment was when Russia realized they were going to have to get into this, and they knew it was a trap. The bear knew it was a trap, but this trap and this problem is right in front of the bear's cave. And these people have been advancing against their promises at the end of the last Cold War not to step one step east towards Russia. And then with Clinton and Bush and Biden and all these people and Obama, they step by step converged right on the borders of Russia. And even were dumb enough to say, oh, the Russian army is right over there. My God, they're so close. I mean, there were people who were actually saying that, leaders like, oh, my God, we're being threatened. Look at all the Russians on the border looking back at us. Yes, well, you just walked 800 kilometers over 10, 15 years to be right to see the whites of their eyes. They haven't moved. You fools have moved. This is what the Russians are seeing is the crazy people that are running the West these days. So, so I could go on so many times in this war. Anything Russia did that showed restraint was concluded by these idiots to be a sign of weakness. And it was interesting because a dear friend of mine, when I sent out that emergency letter about it, I expanded it after she said, "Well, let's hope they remain in restraint." And what I felt, what came out of me was a a further part to the letter where I started to think about Ecclesiastes in the Bible, the Old Testament. And, it says there's a time for everything under heaven. There's a time for love. There's a time for hate. There's a time for sowing, time for reaping. There's a time for war and a time for peace. And I would just add, there's a time for restraint, and there's also a time for no restraint at all, to actually act upon a threat, to demonstrate what these people have forgot, what most of you have forgot, what nuclear weapons can do. And in fact, you can show it by firing weapons that are not nuclear but kinesthetic, like the Oreshnik, all the advanced hypersonic missiles that the Russians have created because the arms race treaties were dismantled by the United States and the Europeans since 2002. All of them. Even the New START was left to come and go in February of this year, I believe, if it wasn't last year. And what that means is the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaties, all the treaties, the IMF Treaty, the ABM Missile Treaty, all these treaties have been erased, many of them by Trump in his first term. So we are naked. We have no deterrence now for arms races across the world. And so this is the place we're in. With wide eyes open shall they walk into these catastrophes. Well, I'm here, and people like me, not just people in the prophetic field, but people in journalism, we're out there trying to really open your eyes to the danger for your own good. Now, the the thing that is good that has happened is the threat. Somehow, these bullywimps in the West that run their countries have revealed a a love to survive their own stupidity. Even these idiots sensed this time around that the Russians were going to launch. Trump got it. Zelensky got it. The two biggest idiots of them all. They have a survival mechanism that's still alive, and that's a good thing. Even a wimp, a bully wimp, has a survival mechanism. where maybe he doesn't want to be thumped first and turned to ash. So these are the things. This is good what happened. This has broken a very bad habit of the West. Not believing restraint is good for them. The Russians made it clear, and the good news is on the 10th of this is today, we would have, if they had done what they had done before and just shrugged it all off as weakness, the West, the center of Kiev would be aflame. Thousands would have died. Many diplomats, because actually the European Union sent more leaders to be there. A lot of leaders would have been killed. The Ukrainian government may have been decapitated. And we would have been in a whole worse world than you can imagine we've already seen in these last few months. Um, Fortunately, there's still a spark of intelligence in these idiots, a need to love life because they felt it, because it was really coming. So once again, we have dodged another bullet. Now, I've over the years on this show and in my writings, I've talked about these, like a Ukrainian missile crisis that was coming, and then it actually came in the final weeks of Biden's presidency as a lame duck. And we were very close for that to have started World War III as a nuclear phase of World War III. We got through that. And I have not felt dread like I felt when I was nearly 7 when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, when I felt it coming. And I was just 6, end of my 6th year. And I felt such an unbelievable dread. I have not, I felt that dread again the months leading up to September 11th, 2001, until the 10th. It was absolute, felt like I was dying from the agony of it. And then it happened. And I had been warning about it in my writings since 1983. I had been warning on national United States and television on the Fox network in March of 1996 that the second attempt on the Twin Towers would be successful. And I talked about the prophecies of the hollow mountains of Nostradamus and the great new city at latitude 45. And now latitudes can have a variance in the 16th century because they had no longitudes then to balance it out. So you can always give a few degrees this way or that because actually New York is 41 degrees. But it's close enough because it has to be a great new city that never existed in the time of the 1550s when Nostradamus wrote it. And you will find in that variance, New York had not existed yet for centuries. The New York City, the hollow mountains of the skyscrapers. Imagine if you highest thing you ever saw was the spires of Notre Dame in Paris, and you're seeing mountain size, 110 story acre stories climbing into the sky. You would be quite awestruck. It would not, in a vision, leave your memory to forget to write it down 4.7 centuries ago. So I am hopeful that this has been once again another example of something I've been telling you all that could be an evidence that a certain thing that's been an idea in India and was much more resurrected in the 20th century during the Cold War is that if spiritual practice across the world can bring to this world 200 more people who become enlightened than the average, because enlightenment consciousness has a quality that in a very small number can counterbalance all the infinite darkness of our unconsciousness. Just like the universe, all of its darkness cannot snuff out a single little candle. Only 200 more than the average will be, if this theory is true and it's happening, then there will be a counterweight of consciousness. And no matter how hard our leaders try, and our sleepwalking citizens of our leaders try to walk wide eyes shut into these catastrophes, they will not go over the abyss. They'll try desperately to destroy themselves unconsciously, but they won't be able to go over the abyss. Now, I've seen a whole lot of runs to that abyss in the last few years, and this was another time where, for the first time I've ever seen it, even the idiot leaders of the West kind of paused and reflected upon what uh, had been warned by Moscow, because it was coming. Now, I hope we don't have to go the next step. It's probably going to happen that a demonstration eventually will have to be done with hypersonic missiles by Russia to really scare straight the leaders of Europe. Hopefully not. I hope this has done it. But even then, if in less than 12 minutes there are hypersonic kinetic warheads that take out every factory that is building drones for Ukraine across Europe, which they could do in about 12 minutes from central Russia. And people in many countries of Europe will see at night these streaming fire flames going whoosh, 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 taking out each factory all across Europe. I hope it doesn't take us that big a demonstration to see the light and start talking and ending this madness that we have pushed upon the Russians and the Iranians. We are the bad guys in this situation. You push them hard enough. If that doesn't work, then Sergei Karaganov, who is a fellow professor in Moscow, a very interesting source, speaks fluent Russian. He has been the advisor of Soviet leaders. He's been the advisor of Russian Federation leaders. And he always says, God forbid we have to go to this point, because he's a practicing Russian Orthodox Christian. And, nuclear weapons are evil. But if it has to happen that even this demonstration doesn't work, then there will be, as my own master predicted long ago, when these whirlwind times come, when there will be no ark to save us from our stupidity. There's only one ark you can find, and it is within you now. And my master said, that ark, the Noah's Ark of consciousness, is what I teach. And it's also what I teach as a disciple of my master. This this consciousness, the lifting of consciousness, all of you have a very important part in this. Lift your consciousness. You may tip the balance and save your future from foolery and stupidity that the West is leading it into. And my master, in that prophecy he made back in March 1983, he also said that not only would there be weather changes that are going out of control, that were biblical floods and droughts and things. He also said, and then the tension of war all around the world would lead eventually to some nuclear detonations. He didn't say the whole bunch, but some nuclear weapons used. So I'm hoping that's what he's meaning, is foreseeing the Soviet or the Russian demonstration of where this could go if the kinetic energy bombs, or farther back, the warning of Russia just recently, does not register to the West. I'm hopeful now, more hopeful that we may actually get the dickens scared out of us, rightfully, to wake up and get through this The the first half of the 2020s, which for 30 years, 40 years I've been predicting would be the key decade for humans' future survival. The first half of it sets the stage. The second half, we are entering, will make the vast changes in 5 years that have not been seen in 5,000 years. That for the better of our existence, we shall bear the travail and be born anew from these travails. So, is there anyone who has a question?
There's two questions, but before I bring them up, when you were talking about Ukraine and the missiles,
Mhm.
X Spaces dropped the live stream.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had to reboot it. So the ones that were trying to join the old link, I just posted the new link and reset it. So, welcome to the world of censorship.
Welcome to well, that's very interesting. We've just had a living example of how there are forces in our world that want you to stay stupid lemmings that are just going to walk off a cliff.
Okay.
And so, but your alertness, you becoming more alert will help that not to happen.
Okay. So, Jared mentioned that he wants to set up a reading for his mother and what your email was. So I did put a link in the chat to John's website to sign up for the reading. But if you just want to,
Yeah, this is great. I'd love to do a reading for her, and this is a beautiful thing that also can happen. I mean, I don't just read the world, but I this very same mystery that helps me read the world accurately, and that's documented, is one-on-one with just me and another human being, and then and it's beautiful because it's very playful and it's very loving when it's one-on-one. And the way I do it is it's on Zoom, and you will see if you see the link for the reading, just click on it, and it will tell you it will take you to an email, and just put Hogue reading on it because I have my computers open wide to receive anything. I don't want any bots to decide what I should see or not see. So that means I have a lot of junk and other things coming through. If you keep it simple with just the one line, Hogue reading, I immediately see it and I will get immediately back to you and give you the times that are available and or talk further about these readings. One thing that's important with these readings is that they 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 can begin, although it's not needed to do it. But you can also, you will send me a free astro.com birth chart, which has a really fine design. It's easy to read for me. And so we might start looking at your astrology. Although I've done a couple readings of late where we just go into the tarot, and that's also great because the way I do tarot, the Grand Celtic Cross is what I do, which, you have the issue of the reading. The lock and the key is a card that's over it. The top card I call the message from the world of splashing waves on the surface of the oceanic consciousness. They all splash and they're all identified with their shapes and have completely forgotten to look in and notice that all of them have exactly the same water of the oceanic consciousness in them. But that 1/10, so that's the 1/10 conscious world. The bottom card underneath the center card of the cross is the message from the oceanic, the source of all of us, then the depths, then the past, then the future. Now, there's this thing I do which surprises even me, and I wonder if any of you do this. I will start a Celtic cross, and and then if it gets to a point, the cards will tell me it just happens. It's like you need to pull me out of this deck and start all over again, a new Celtic cross. I just did a reading like this the other day, and 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 it was with Susan. We had a wonderful, wonderful time. We these readings. What I do is I usually have it set on Zoom for free, so I just do the 40 minutes, and then there will be a pause for 10 minutes, and then I will send the Zoom meeting link again to start another 40 minutes, and then I will do it a third time. And so it's usually 3 times 40 minutes is the reading. So it's a nice long reading. So it needs little breaks. So you can get up, move around, go to the bathroom, do, walk around. But there's a phenomenon that happens, and it'll be interesting to see if you get a reading, if you also experience this, because many of the people who do the reading experience it. There's, I don't know what makes it do this because, I do this work like a millipede walks on 500 legs on either side of its body. I don't think about how I'm thinking has to be out of the way. Being has to be there. And then from that source, as I was initiated by Osho to do this, he said, from that space, whatever you say and do is absolutely right. It's what's needed in the moment for the client, what's needed for the moment for the world to hear as well. But the small and the large are the same to me. So anyway, what happens is I get a little warning 30 minutes in, and then a time clock starts going on the other person's screen as well as mine. But what will happen with each 40 minutes, the warning seems to come much faster, then like it was just a minute ago. Time, I can only say that whatever happens with this interaction, time changes. The clocks are the same, but time changes. Times, I think we mistake it for going fast when actually it's standing still. There are moments where time seems to stand still. And and so I don't know how it works. Don't ask the millipede how he walks. He'll fall over. Just enjoy it. But what I love about this is, and it's quite entertaining in the middle of the reading, is it's like we're going through the reading and it's like, oh, there goes 40 minutes, like it wasn't even there. And we laugh, because the little light goes on. And then it's a wonderful, it's kind of an epic way to do readings, but it's worth it because we go deep into things, and the cards are playful as they are deep. They are the Osho Zen Tarot deck. Makes sense. I'm a disciple of Osho, a devotee of Osho. So Mahadeva Padma was a friend of mine who drew and painted these cards, and what they were like about this big, a little acrylic painting with fine brush strokes. And in the ashram in 1987, when Osho was guiding her into creating the Osho Zen Tarot deck, it used to happen that if you passed the ashram bookstore, there would be one of the paintings in the window display drying out. So I got to see a lot of these paintings after they were just painted to become later these cards, which this deck has become one of the most popular cards in the world since then. And so I'd love to play and go deep with all of you guys playfully. And it's a wonderful experience for me and for my readers. So hopefully your mom will do this, and hopefully a lot of you will come in and get this reading, and we can share a wonderful experience together.
All right. The next question was, do you think Maxwell will be pardoned by Trump?
Max,
Ghislaine Maxwell.
Oh, Maxwell. See, you said Maxwell. I couldn't.
No, no,
Maxwell,
Maxwell.
Gillian Maxwell. Well, if he can pardon himself, which I'm sure he will do of everything, he could pardon her too, I suppose. Um, I don't know. I don't know if he will be there to pardon anyone. I've said a long time that I mean, I made notes of it in 2016 when I had just released my first book on Trump. I was about to get ready to write about his second term, and I was kind of hoping that I was starting early to look at this stuff. And since I said, well, how old will he be in at the end of his second term? And I wondered because I know his family, towards the end of their life cycle, a lot of Trumps get dementia. And I thought, oh, well, is he going to get it? And so I dug up the notes for that and I published it in the Hogue Prophecy Reports. They're from September of 2016, I think. And I would look at them. No, it was yeah, I think yeah, no, it was the end of 2016. But anyway, I would look at them. And now, and I was writing in outline forms, one-liners, and I basically said, well, it looks like he'll just miss having cognitive decline. The window will open a year or two after. If I said he'd have two terms. I never expected that he would have them separated by 4 years because of what was certainly a fraud, national fraud with ballots that took place in the 2020 election. I can prove it. Just open those sacks and get some political scientists in 50 straight states to start reading the chads of all those stacked up sacks of ballots across 50 states and some territories. Because what happened in 2020 is exactly what happened in 2000. And back then I said, no, Bush did not win the popular vote of Florida to win the Electoral College. That Al Gore had won and Bush was a false president. And everybody's going, oh, you're just a sore loser. You've been predicting since 1968 the accurate guy, and you just can't handle that you lost. I said, no, well, prove me wrong. Count those ballots, count all the ballots of Florida. And a year later in Tallahassee, a bunch of political scientists did count them. Gore won by 76 votes. So when that happened, at last, I'm always happy to have objective evidence disprove what I'm saying or prove what I'm saying. And I tell you, it's the same vibe in 2000 that made that prediction. It's the same vibe that I made in September of 2020. I saw the fraud coming before it became a big thing to do. And I tell you, if you count those ballots all across the nation, if there's not been burned, you will find that Trump probably won a slim popular vote, but for sure the Electoral College again. You will find at least 5 to 6 million, sorry, 5 or 6 million fraudulent ballots mailed in. And the other indication of the proof of that, with more people anticipating another fraud, isn't it funny that about 5 million votes were less than what happened in 2020? That's a tell of something shifty going on. Where did all those ballots go away to? It's the largest vote in history. It's beyond reality for Americans voting that much. For a guy who spent most of his time in the election process hiding in his bunker in his basement in Delaware and only being interviewed there. And sometimes I watched his interviews and he'd have some of these combusts with his dementia, Biden, and he'd start going, wow, I need to get really angry. And then they go, okay, our interview is over. Click, black, just like Xing us out today. And so, uh, yeah.
There's this one guy that says Trump died last January in a helicopter accident with 87 other souls in DC. What is this guy talking about?
Well, that must come from the National Perspirer. it is the new magazine that has followed the National Enquirer, which I used to read. And you must all go online and find it. The National Perspirer is as real as that story and all those people killed in a helicopter. But go ahead, find it. You won't. That's BS. Sorry. There's a lot of that out there. A
Well,
lot.
yeah, I suspect there's actually going to be more because the Onion took over Infowars, and now they're gonna just make it a big parody about about Alex Jones. So I can see that there's going to be more of this Inquirer stuff.
No, that's not true, is it? You're joking.
Am I joking?
Are
No,
you joking?
no, I'm not joking.
The Onion took
The
over
Onion
Alex
took
Jones?
over. The Onion took over Infowars.
When?
It was last week. Through
Oh,
they had
I was busy with Ukraine. I missed
yeah,
that one.
no, no.
I'll
What
go check that
happened
out.
was is that he had to sell because he was going bankrupt. He had to sell it, and that consortium bought the assets.
Now that would be a great joke of the Onion to do for as a fake.
Well, no, I mean, so the problem is that there's money backing them. There's no real business reason to do it
Yeah.
other
Uh,
than to muddy just kind of like create a smoke screen,
yeah.
create, a lot of, a lot of fake news and fake articles. And then it hurts I think it hurts um, the alternative news genre.
Oh, well, I can tell you this whole thing. I'm actually often called from people to train them. I think I'll do a little now for your audience because there's been in the last few months these AI versions of a lot of my major sources, Alexander McCurris, John Mearsheimer, Scott Ritter, to the point that now Scott has to put up the real Scott Ritter. And so I'm often getting letters and often I'm writing and speaking about it, is how you can tell when, like if I become the AI John Hogue, I'll act the way they work. My mouth will be it'll be like curling and blurring. The lips will blur, and I will do that, and I will go this again. And none of my emphases will be in harmony with my emphasis as I'm saying it.
And it loops. If you notice the
Oh
vision
yes,
loop a little bit, if
and
you
it'll go
watch
look like
for
this,
long
and you
enough,
jerk, and then your arms are not actually following what you're saying. It's almost like a John Wayne moment where he goes, "Well, I tell you, little fella, you just got to go over there." You know? Or that's actually too accurate for over there. And yeah, I mean, I should do courses on how to watch a fake.
but YouTube, they're producing a lot of AI slop now. The creators are what is called AI slop,
Yeah,
and so you have individuals doing this AI off of Mearsheimer and others.
yeah.
But also, if you just look at documentaries about anything, history
Oh,
documentaries, what
oh,
you'll notice right now, it's a lot of it is AI driven compared to last year or 2 years ago.
yes.
And what's going to happen, I think, is that individuals will actually stop using YouTube. They'll stop. I will not watch an AI documentary, even if it's accurate, because I would rather have some narrator walking in a scene or, just I want some human creativity
Yeah,
with what I'm watching instead of AI driven content. So I think
well,
that many people feel the way I do and that
yeah.
it's going to hurt YouTube.
Well, yeah, in fact, there is some word, I don't know if it's true, but some of the alternative media people, because they complain about it and it doesn't get taken off of YouTube. And when you look at the clicks that they're getting from these fake representations of people like Mearsheimer or the Duran or these people, um, they're making a buck out of it. That's one accusation. I don't know if that's true, but they are actually made by YouTube, people that are in cahoots with YouTube. Because why is it just all the alternative media people? That's trying to deceive people, and they do the voices very good. But unfortunately, like Scott Ritter, he kind of talks like this, and he goes on. He doesn't breathe. He just keeps going on and going on. And if you really watch Scott Ritter, he's always going, well, and then he's moving around, and he usually has an ironic smile that comes up when he's about to deliver some put finger pointing at BS. And so I had a friend, longtime friend, who says, I'm having a hard time. Is this really Scott Ritter doing it, or is it somebody else? And so I had this idea. I said, so I watched the one he watched, and I'm actually going to do an article on it, either in my new Substack or in the Hogue Prophecy report. And it's going to be out there where I'm going to give you two examples. And you're going to watch the unreal Scott Ritter with his voice kind of like this, and he doesn't have any monotone, and you know. And then when you go to the real Scott Ritter, for one thing, the fake Scott Ritter has perfectly good teeth, front teeth, upper teeth. But Scott has this habit where he rarely shows his front teeth as he's talking. You see the bottom teeth because the front teeth are actually pointy and a little fang-like. And so you'll see Scott's real teeth. And
Do
it's
you
good
think
to use this as a challenge to get more alert. This is You can turn the tables on these people who are trying to slop everything. If you start becoming alert to smell BS and smell BS documentaries and BS facsimiles of real people um, that they don't like, you know, then, then you can turn this ugly thing into something good. It'll make you more keen, more sharp, more aware of, and that'll be good because you don't want to be hoodwinked. Maybe you do, if you don't try. But for those of you who don't like being lied to and think it's heading you to some value, um, the first thing you can do is start being a lot more alert. Now, on the point of documentaries, now, of course, in my work, I watch hundreds of hours of documentaries and things, and and I've been doing it now. It's in my experience of documentaries. It's even though those silly things are happening, and I just go somewhere else. I don't stay there, but I do find old documentaries that have not been changed. And all the documentaries pretty much up to this year are they're still there. I find them. Um, this is another thing I should teach. I should teach how to use algorithms. It's my open secret. I just have a knack for put, putting the right code together and getting to all kinds of places that I'm surprised I get into. The main thing is, the main fundamental thing is your YouTube, your AI world is trying to magnify your ego's interests. And after a while, you will think you're reaching a lot of people and a lot of things, but what you're actually being done by this AI is bricked into your own little ego world where all you hear is what you want to hear. All you see is what you want to see. And all the people who are giving you juice are just reflections of your own ego, what it likes. It's one of the reasons why even before AI was doing this so well, why so many people on YouTube and other places, if they're given by accident a contrary answer, if somebody said, "Well, no, that's not true," or "No, actually, it was Vladimir Zelensky who started those threats." No, it wasn't. You can't say that. People melt down. They kind of melt down like 7 or 14-year-olds because they are being slowly turned into infantile uh, troglodytes, zombies, because the machine is trying to narrow down. And there's one way to break it. It's a very simple way. I mean, it's kind of a variation of what you do, Paul, with all your different channels. Is I call go Ewok. Go Ewok in the like in uh,
Like,
Return of the Jedi. They get into the big Imperial two-legged thing. They hop in there and they get in the seats and they just start pushing buttons. And like poor Chewbacca's on top, still outside. And he's trying to get in. He falls upside down into it. And he finally gets in to actually pilot the thing. Start being Ewoks, folk. Push a button. You go online, you go to something you never even be interested in, and push it. Push it, give it a thumbs up. Go to something, give it a thumbs up. Stuff you never deal with. And what you're doing is you're training the robot, the algorithms, to give you everything rather than nourish and feed your unconscious ego interests.
another thing that I've noticed, and it's tied into the algorithm, is just that it has a tendency to feed people into emotional topics or emotionally charged.
Mm,
And there there's a feedback loop, positive feedback loop for more of it. So
mm.
what happens is that you have podcasters talking about other podcasters like Candace Owens talking about
Candace
Tucker
Owens versus
Carlson, or vice versa, or what's
yeah,
going on with Candace Owens
soap
and
opera.
Ben Shapiro and all this.
Yeah.
And what happens is that there's more eyeballs to their channel, so they do it more often for the advertising revenue. So
Yeah.
what's happening with YouTube now is just that unless you break the algorithm, you're in this whole psychological cesspool,
Yeah.
and some people love hearing it, and other people are just like they tune out.
Now, as a meditator, I've tried this with X. I watch how X is like it'll start off, it's like you dig with each thing that scrolls up. At first, it's things you're really looking for. And then at a certain point, it gets eventually to the big bosomed girls playing around with their clothes and people getting in fights in bars. And, the it becomes really sordid and at a certain point you go, stop. My eyes are watering. I'm watching what it's doing to me as I watch, as a
Well,
meditator.
another thing that I've noticed, John, is just that there seems to be a marketing scheme within X to push for people to become addicted to cigarettes. If you notice, a lot of pictures
Yeah,
of celebrities from the 50s are popping up smoking. You have these little ads. And I think what's going to happen is it's prepping for more pulmonary disease in the future. And when I say in the future, I'm not talking 20 years away. I'm talking like
that'll be great for the sickness industrial
24
complex.
months away.
Yeah, there'll be more people sick. We don't want healthy people. We'll
Right.
go out of business. We're not like what the Chinese did, where you didn't get paid unless if a person got sick, you stopped getting paid. So they made it was health oriented. But and I'm not talking about you as a doctor or anything like that. It's this big system, the sickness industrial
More,
complex,
more
not
people,
sickness.
I'm noticing more people in New York because they're stressed. And I'm noticing
Mhm.
females, not get guys, but females smoking more often on the streets.
Yeah.
But that declined for several years pre-COVID. All right.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden it's popping up again. And I'm willing to bet it's because of social media pushing it or pushing it in uh, maybe the movies or in TV series that people are watching on Netflix or whatever.
Yeah.
But this is not healthy
Yeah.
because there was a little bit of a trend where people were starting to get healthy. But I'm starting to see with these algorithms with social media, they're trying to get you back into this unhealthy state. And it makes
Yeah,
you wonder
because
why. It makes
you make more money with people in misery and sickness. They have to go to the psychiatrist. They have to go to the hospital. You know, we make sure the food's shit so that they get sick over a period of life. And we make health food expensive and junk food cheap. And really should, if the whole country would be healthier if we actually said, I mean, Bloomberg was wrong when he tried to get rid of the big slurpy bottles of
oh the
sugarized pop and made what he should have done is said, no, no, you can have as much as it's a free country, but with freedom comes responsibility. And so you go ahead and ruin your body, but we're charging this extra tax on these things because the rest of us will have to pay for your health care because you were irresponsible with the way you got yourself ruined at an early age with all
well,
this junk.
I'd take it one step further. I would
Hmm?
say that if certain behaviors actually are known to mitigate, or let me rephrase it. If certain behaviors have a tendency to lead to further decline in health, then there should be actually less medical care for that individual that's provided.
You know,
So, like
it,
for example, if someone, let's say they have a pulmonary disease, they end up getting COPD. It's not because of a work-related incident, but it was because they were smoking. Then I would say, why should they get medical? Why should insurance pay for their actual self-induced disease?
well, because it's just like what's going on X and other places, psychic degeneration. It's there is a very dark, unconscious, habitual way that's overtaking the world and the society. It's not overtaking some countries. It's not overtaking Russia. It's not overtaking China at this point. But here in the West, there's all kinds of forces that are really trying to destroy the civilization and people within it. I mean, the other thing that's amazing is how European leadership just opened the gates and let all all these people, African people, Asian people, Middle Eastern people, many of them trying to escape the wars of the West, and just let them in. And, I remember that France used to be, I mean, I have some French friends, and they're telling me about this all the time, how um, it used to be that people came to France, and it was just known that if you come to France, if you're black or African or Asian or something, you have to learn French and assimilate yourself in the society. Now, you can still go to the mosque, you can still do all of that, and you should, but it's just, but you look at Russia, and Russia is one of the most populous countries with Muslims in it, and they don't have wars and problems because of, I mean, Russia's a great example of how you can make this work and keep everybody's individual religion and culture respected. Um, right now, my friend says that in Paris, I mean, it's like there's it's like turning into Africa, and it's like the people are not even trying to assimilate. It's literally they just do what they wanted to do in Africa, and they're doing it there, and the Parisian government is just giving them the means and the the money to destroy European culture. And the irony is that when it all goes down and it's in ruins as culture, the irony is those people will probably go back to Africa because it'll be getting better. It'll be more improved. But it's not because they came to France. It'll be because of the Africans who stayed there who made it better. And then they may say, no, no, we don't want you back. You're the past, we won't want you back. You've gotten into this whole thing of just, I'm entitled to destroy a civilization to save it.
And you're seeing it in New York with the mayor, with the taxation.
Yeah.
But there are supposedly 5 states that are looking into second home taxation.
Well, Aquarius, now I get a little astrological with everybody here. We are at the end of 2024. Pluto finished its 7 transits back and forth over the United States birth position of Pluto at 27 degrees Capricorn. 248 years it took for it to come back and do those 7 back and forth, back and forth. Pluto rules ages, epochs, cycles of history, and generational transformation or degeneration. And Pluto is now moved again to go through the 12 zodiac signs again. And it will not return until 2177-ish, I think, in the next return. So America has lived through one life cycle and now has an opportunity either to die as a nation, break up, or renew itself in a new 248-year life cycle. And since it's now repeating what the stars, how they were at its birth, and what it gave birth to was the Declaration of Independence, all of the blueprint for this country. When in 1777, the year after the Declaration was declared, Pluto went into Aquarius. Aquarius is the sign of masses of people seeking personal sovereignty. And they do this with revolution. The United States triggered the Enlightenment with Rousseau and all that was happening in France was read in the 13 colonies of the British America. And then those ideas were helping the founding fathers and mothers of this country create a new form of modern democracy. But that modern democracy was a blueprint in 1776 that became a battle, a construction, a building, an action in the early degrees of Aquarius that saw the US Constitution born, the Bill of Rights created. It was the blueprint now starting to actually create the signs and the tools of a revolutionary concept. And the French were fascinated with it, French people. And in fact, then they had in 1789, they had a revolution based on what happened in America. And that revolution was the doorway for a century of revolutions to, to change the world in these 248 years since America was born. Now, these we are now not we have just finished in 1994 the cycle of the United States birth and death, and now it's got a chance to be reborn again, but it has to redefine itself, as Americans are actually very good at doing if they don't miss every 29-year return of Saturn to Scorpio. And I've written articles about this in the 2000s and all that. After the end of the Civil War, uh, it ended with Scorpio returning to the sign of Pluto turning to the sign of Scorpio. We had this terrible cancer that was with us at the inception of our nation of slavery, and they were wise not to try to fix that too, on top of just trying to establish a republic. So it was wise of them to put that aside because it the republic would have never happened. They were smart enough to realize that that ugly part of us had to be something that within the coming decades, every which way the North and the South tried to deal with free states and slave states, they tried their best. They did everything to make it happen. And finally came this prophet just before it happened, John Brown, one of the most accurate prophets in the history of prophecy. He was an abolitionist. He was in with the inner circle of abolitionists living in Springfield, uh, uh, Massachusetts. And even he, after being part of the Underground Railways, trying to save slaves and bring them to the North, its whole network, he was very much involved in that. Courageous and a man who didn't just talk about freeing people, but did it. And even he came to a conclusion which was not easy for him to conclude to. He long and hard meditated upon this problem, and he finally, by the 1850s, he was saying, you know what? This cannot be solved through peaceful means. This curse upon our land between North and South will require a baptism of blood in a civil war. It's the only way, and all Americans will repent on either side. That this it has to be purged by battle. And now, Frederick Douglass, who was one of my favorite heroes, I even played him one time. Forgive me, blackface, good bushy beard and all that. When I was in sophomore year of high school, I actually read his speech and I dressed myself up, put black on me and this wiry wig, and I played him in a little drama in my sophomore year. Uh, and I love this man. I want to be this man. and and so this man, when he was younger, he met up with John Brown in this church in Springfield, and all night they discussed this very issue. Can we solve this problem through peace, or must it be solved through war? And unlike the Hollywood renditions of John Brown, he was actually a very measured man in the way he just bore witness to Frederick Douglass and said, "I've looked at this, I've fought with this, and now I realize, being on the Underground Railway and all, I've come to the conclusion. It's not a conclusion I want; it's a conclusion that's the truth." Is that this can only end up in a civil war. And so they spoke to each other about it until dawn. And then Frederick Douglass, in later books, wrote about that night. And he said, I still continued to fight for peaceful means to bring this about. But in the end, even more and more, it became apparent to me that John Brown was right, even though I could not do that, rebel like that. So even Frederick Douglass had to come to Jesus moment about it. And then when he was also had his eccentric side, he then tried to start an insurrection, and he was paid by all the top abolitionists, including the husband of the woman who would later write the Battle Hymn of the Republic. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is, all that amazing song. And so he went for it. He didn't have enough men. He didn't have enough money, but he was trying to take the armory in Harper's Ferry and try. He was a man of action. He's not just going to talk about it. he's going to do it. And so he tried to start an insurrection with some other, armed abolitionists and blacks and people that were joining him. And it ended up that he was holed up in the armory. That they cut the wires in Harper's Ferry, but the wires a few miles outside the next town were good. So people ran there, wired Washington. And guess who marched into with the Marines to take down John Brown and his guys in this insurrection? Colonel Robert E. Lee of Virginia, a Union colonel. And who was his liaison officer? Um, um, it was that red-bearded cavalryman. That was the greatest cavalryman of the Confederacy. I can't remember his name, but he was the man that was a famous big red-bearded cavalryman who was the main commander of cavalry for the Army of Northern Virginia. He was also there. Yeah, you can check it out for me. I'm having an elderly moment.
Did he survive the war or was he killed?
No, he died in Brandy Station. He died, and it's very tragic because somehow he just it's so funny about the Confederate Army. Whenever they got north, whenever they crossed the Mason-Dixon and did stuff, they found that the Northerners shot better and they fought better, and then they did some dumb stuff. And what he did in the Battle of Gettysburg, which decided the Civil War, um, maybe his name was Brady, I don't know, but that was the photographer. He went on a wild goose chase, capturing all kinds of Union wagons and supplies, which certainly the Army of North Virginia needed. But he did this, not doing his duty, which is be the eyes of the Army of Northern Virginia. So poor Lee was fighting the first of 3 days at Gettysburg, and he didn't know where the Union Army was because this guy was off on some wild goose chase, and he came back, and it was a very stern Robert E. Lee. He said, "Sir, you are the eyes of the army, and the army you made blind." And of course, he wanted to take his sword. If you put in the algorithm who is the most famous Confederate cavalry general, it'll come right up.
Jeb
Uh,
Stewart?
yeah, Jeb Stuart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, he gives Lee the sword, and Lee says, "I tell you, there's no time for this." So he says, "Look," as he gives him back his sword, a mistake, his sword. He says, "Look, a mistake has been made. And as a man, you just take it and move on and do your duty. I will not let you resign. I need you. You are my eyes for this war." And so in 1864, when it's clear that the South was losing because of Gettysburg, because of Stuart kind of had a presentiment that he was going to
Uh,
die.
I just saw his picture. Now I know.
Yeah, yeah. He had a presentiment that he was going to die, and in the last day of his life, he was very depressed. Kind of had a feeling, oh man, and I think he felt that then that it was my fault. I I I lost this war. Of course, it would have lost anyway, but anyway, he now, if Lee had not ignored his Longstreet, General Longstreet had the right idea. Now, Lee might have been a great general, but he was Napoleonic in his way of generaling. Longstreet was a man of the future. He was already aware of the need to do strategic withdrawals. And what he wanted the army to do is get back over the Appalachian passes, go down around and get behind the Union on a field where it was the Union Army that had to extend itself wide and attack up hills to fight the Confederate Army by putting himself between Washington and the Union Army. And it's possible that the battle that would have happened then might have ended the Civil War with the preservation of, unfortunately, of the slave states. So there were a lot of big things that happened in that moment, but of that campaign. Um, so uh, This is what's so important about looking at documentaries. And I would just tell people, don't look at any of the new stuff. Now, I've seen a few people use artificial intelligence right. And actually, there are some people that are using AI where they have you literally walking through Rome during the empire's greatest days or walking through Constantinople. And it is magnificent what they're doing. And it's not full of the bogus stuff or somebody wearing a top hat in the middle of it or that. I know because this is an important message. If you, all of you, if you think AI means that you have to be less vigilant and less educated, you are fatally wrong. You will have to even know your history even more better and then if you do, AI, you will know how to tame AI with your own intelligence and make it do what you want it to do, not let it become an authority that it is not in your life. It will only hasten your retardation.
But here's the issue with the citizenry in the United States. They have a knee-jerk reaction on public policy, what they're voting for, a particular candidate or a particular proposal in their town. Most of the voters really do not know the nuance of policy.
They've never
You can,
read the Constitution.
right. And so you can take this one step further. And it's like if they're not informed enough to just vote, then they're not really informed enough to really give the reins of decision making to AI. you know,
No,
so so
yeah,
we what I'm noticing is that as we march closer and closer to maybe the singularity point, the quality of everything is going down. The quality of clothing, the quality of car making, the quality of the service sector, going to the restaurant has gone down. The quality of people speaking to one another in a civil manner has gone down. So I'm seeing that it's not elevating us, it seems to make us devolve.
it is. It's the sad reality that the forces of unconsciousness in us, our habitual mechanical ways, is one of the main reasons why we have become a species of Dr. Frankensteins, trying to make in our own image, which is ego driven and robotic, even though we are organic, um, not living in consciousness. And it's all too predictable where it will go. I've said often there are three things that threaten the future of humanity. World War III, a nuclear holocaust, is the least threatening. We will survive that. The second is a little harder to survive. The sixth mass extinction, better known as global warming. Not climate change. It's global warming, folks. The world is heating up. Just look at the temperatures since 1998. The aggregate of the rising falling temperatures is up, up, up. Even if you have a down and an up, it's all going that way. With so so that's the second one. But I've been saying since 1990, I used to call what people call artificial intelligence today. I called it virtual enlightenment. Virtual enlightenment. I'm virtually enlightened. I'm virtually a Buddha. I'm virtually, look at me, pretend a Christ conscious being. And I wrote about how this would cause a climate where in our collective souls, in our collective intellect, that we would be extinct from it. This is the greatest danger, and we've entered it now with the other two looming. Um, this idea that we should be a Dr. Frankenstein creating this monster. Now, Monster has, in 16th century French, since I've studied it with Nostradamus, has a very interesting meaning. Monstre also means to show some divine omen. Monstre means um, to reveal and as well. So monstre means some vision, some frightening thing, a warning. Frankenstein, the monstre, is a warning. And artificial idiocy is, I would have everybody never call it intelligence again. If you're an intelligent person, you will not call artificial. You will not call intelligence artificial. That is the greatest oxymoron ever made. I'm almost smart. I'm almost creative. I almost have revelations that make light bulbs light. Almost. It's like my friend Roger Heisman and I used to do funny skits and stuff and radio and stuff, and we had this one ad, Almost, who was a very great creator of preservatives and food and frigerizing food. He has now created new things that you can put into a microwave and eat. You can have almost a breakfast, almost dinner, almost lunch. Get almost foods. It's almost good. You know, it's like-
You
we all
know,
had thought police.
you know
We
what,
had the thought police thing
yeah,
where
with
where
this,
these guys would be like Cubans with big sunglasses on and they were kind of Cuban looking. And there was this gal and she was feeding things to her dog. And then she's going petting the bed and the dog gets up, a collie or something gets up on the bed. And suddenly the camera widens and there's the two thought police. They're just standing there looking. And then she kind of goes, oh, and then she's grabbed and arrested. And then they come back in, they grab the dog.
with your story reminded me of a story that took place when I was in 10th grade. And in this class, we had to go behind a screen and do a radio commercial. So each student had to do this. You had to write a script, and do a radio commercial, and then you get graded on your performance. And one of the students was um he typically misbehaved. He wasn't a good student. He was smart, but he just wasn't a good student, and was always the jokester. So he was doing a commercial about condoms, and the teacher didn't let him finish and threw him out to go to see the principal. But right when you're telling me that story, I haven't had that thought because that was like decades ago. That must have been in 86, 87, 86, I think it was 87, 1987 when that happened. So yeah,
I would do something, a variation of that.
I don't remember
If I
what.
if I was behind the sheet doing it because of this incredible pollen season that we had. I mean, it literally the next island I see out my window here, it looked like it was having a drizzle over it. And then I looked closer and it was yellow and there was no rain clouds above it. It was literally yellow clouds of pollen. My roof is still yellow, and so uh, uh, so I would do an ad about uh, to what trees come. They come. The come of trees. Shall they come forth? And do it a little Shakespearean, To be or to not be coming would be unbecoming, would it not?
I remember that and getting thrown out of the class for that. But
What did he become? What did he become? A dictator of Bosnia or something?
I have no idea.
Some other Eastern European country?
Maybe, who knows? I'm not sure. I mean, I didn't keep any contact with people that were from my high school. I
Best
just
to leave them behind, yes.
I don't think many I don't think many people do are still friends with their high school cohorts.
It is interesting that way. I mean, I had a few like Roger Heisman. He was really a good friend of mine, uh, and it's true. You kind of there's very few that I can think of
And
that
if some people, if some of
or
your
Jim Oot. Hello, Jim.
I can see, sometimes you may be a high school friend and then you go to the same college. And
Mm,
if that's the case, then most likely you'll stay friends.
yeah.
But most of the time, people go to different colleges, different universities. And therefore, you make new friends, you lose contact, and all of a sudden, you know, you don't know what's going on with their lives.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, when you get famous, though, it's interesting. Sometimes,
they just creep up.
like a lot of people, a lot of people I used to go to high school with watch me, and
Uh,
and that's kind of funny. And then what's also nice is that some of my teachers actually got in touch with me, and that was nice to them. They would like say, "Hey, it's really cool where you've gone with this because you definitely, we used to say in the Ridgecrest Middle School on Palos Verdes, when they had the little memento magazine for each year, we had a list and they'd say, what would he become? And mine was he'd become a library, a history library. He would morph into a history library. It's an accurate prophecy. So,
yeah, no, I just, you think back on you go back in time and think about what was going on during high school years and, you know, even elementary school years. And those are formative years for an individual,
it is.
you know.
You're starting to awaken into your sexuality and all kinds of things are happening. Yeah, it was a lot of things happen. I mean, it was when I was 15 that I discovered the music of Wagner. It's been a lifetime love affair for me in opera. And then it was because of that that I did a little hiatus in my trajectory, which was always meant to be a writer. And I tried and almost succeeded in becoming an opera singer. Was the protege of William Chapman in New York City Opera, and I was being tutored and prepared in those days. The German opera houses were built for American singers to sing in them, and I was going to go off to Stuttgart and have a lyric baritone career. I probably would have done a lot of Mozart and Donizetti and the more lyric things, and Die Zauberflöte, the magic flute. Um, I don't really like Mozart to listen, but I love to perform him. And last thing I did was Figaro in the Marriage of Figaro. And but I wasn't good at the politics. And in the world of the prima donnas, with knives in the backs and all. I just was not good at it. And frankly, I didn't like the idea. I would have probably been fine with it 100 years earlier when you just lived in one opera house. You were in the community and it was your life and you did that. Unfortunately, Wagner's responsible for not only making modern conducting, where he wrote an essay on it and he said that we shouldn't be a metronome. We should interpret more and we should also not have we should turn our back on the audience so that the orchestra sees our gestures, our eyes, our emotions, so you can get everybody together even better. Otherwise, conductors used to be at a table and they would just conduct like this, looking at the audience at the side of the orchestra. Wagner changed all that, and all this kind of flurry and being being very dramatic with the sweep of hair. Well, if everybody's watched Bernstein sweep and be dramatic, he literally he's moving just like Wagner did when he was a conductor, and he was also a guest conductor, which no one ever done before, where he started traveling all over Europe and conducting, even in Moscow and Leningrad, to get away from his creditors, so or make money for them. And so I was shocked to see how much he really defined how modern conducting works. Um, including the drama of it and all of that, performing of it, and yeah. So yeah, that all happened when I was a lot of seeds were planted. And from mid '60s to the end of the '60s, I had seeds, amazing. It was during that time where I heard the name of Nostradamus for the first time and in Ridgecrest Middle School, in a documentary. It was after lunch, and we're all growing still in that age. So whenever you could fall asleep in the darkness of a documentary, you just lay your head down on the little desk, and you can manage that. So I'm hearing, I know the documentary, or I've seen the footage before in other documentaries where it's the famous Berlin university scene where Goebbels, the propaganda minister, is having all these kids throwing books into a huge bonfire. And there's books of Jewish authors. And he was saying, we're going to purge all this. And so they're showing that. And the narrator is saying, back in the 1550s, there was a man named Nostradamus. And I heard that name and I was almost asleep. And I immediately woke up and was like, boom, up in my chair, like somebody struck me with lightning. And my first impression was a feeling of tremendous familiarity and another feeling of that is the strangest name I've ever heard. Those were my first impulses of what ended up being my whole life's trajectory. By 1974, when I graduated from high school, I made a decision that I was not going to go the final step because otherwise I'd be completely programmed. And I decided that I would not go to college and that the world would be my university to learn from it. And so it was then that I started studying Nostradamus. And then on the ranch, when I was in the Oregon commune of Rajneeshpuram, as now a disciple of Osho, in 1983, I was a post hole digger, and at one of my many jobs in those 4 years. And Osho, then somebody came up from the office as I'm looking down the hole of my next sign, and he said, "Oh, Osho just broke his silence to the world and sent out this prophecy, the Noah's Ark of Consciousness, which I was talking about earlier." And it's a funny thing that on my in my footlocker, I had a 2,500 books in my library before I went there. I managed to give that all away and buy and live off of it for years because you could get 25% to 50% cover price in those days for your books, since books were still valued by people. Now you go in and use books, places and magazines, they don't give you anything. I mean, I had Omni. I had all the Omni magazines, which was a treasure. No one even wanted a penny for it. So in this day and age, um, the only book, and it's odd because it wasn't conscious, but I just did it. I had all this electric black tape to keep it together, and it was this black book, and it was Erica Cheatham's translations of Nostradamus. And I was pulled to it because she was I thought it's the first time a woman's intuition gets a chance to look at these prophecies. It's always been men who've been writing about it. So I was pulled to that idea. And so she was my doorway into all the other scholars and stuff. So, so it was then in 1983 that I started to read him and started to really absorb it. And that's when I started writing my first articles for the Rajneesh Times where a number of very interesting predictions, which I revealed in my book, Nostradamus Premonition of 911, which is a must read. You go online and read it as an ebook or as a printed book because it's a very personal story. And a lot of my readers say it's one of my best books, where I take you through the evolution of my visions of the World Trade Center from 1983 and as they adapted to more evidence kind of like precog crime, Philip K. Dick stuff. You're trying to find the murder and the mystery. Right up to the day before it happened, and then the following morning, literally watching the thing happen and see the parts that I couldn't completely understand as clues become revealed before my eyes in real time. It's quite a book. It starts with a study of mass visions, how a lot of people had premonitions of World War One, how a lot of people had premonitions that the Titanic would sink. And so I started with those, ending with Carl Gustav Jung's famous confession about this. He thought he was having a psychotic break in 1913, but he was actually, um, he realized after a while, because we always personalize our visions. That's what ego does. It's about me somehow. But if you go deeper into it, sometimes it's not about you. It's something really bigger than you that you're feeling is coming. And so he finally understood that it was some big war, and he was in England when it happened. He got back to Switzerland and he realized that he started to study how people have mass premonitions. And there were a lot of mass premonitions about 911 because 911, not since 911 have we entered a period like we are now, where something like that changes the course of all our lives into another historical pathway, all our lives across the world. What is happening now in this year, with the culmination coming soon of the Ukrainian-Russian war, where Russia will win it, what's coming now, where Iran has now become in this war the fourth power in this world. America, Russia, China, and now Iran has now, in this war, become a power to be reckoned with. And it will see the rapid end of America as a hegemon.
Well, what's interesting is Brzezinski wrote in his chess uh,
Mm,
chessboard book. I don't
yeah,
know the title, but
yeah.
he mentions that the worst case scenario that he saw was an alignment of Russia, Iran, and China. But the probability
Well, we
is low. But right, but we
Well,
have.
yeah, he's right, but he's right. It's a triangulation of powers that literally he kind of partially seen the future, but he couldn't wrap his because of his biases. He couldn't understand why that it would be America's hubris and foolishness and strutting around like a great superpower that it hasn't been for decades. And there would someday come, it's like the bully who's not really that good a fighter. He always scares the kids in the sandbox. But it's always happens that someday he meets his match and they get thumped on their butt. And now the rest of the people in the sandlot called our countries now know that we are no longer anything but a paper tiger as a country. We are not this world unipolar hegemonic force anymore. We haven't been for years. It's the curse of people who win wars is they never reflect upon how they won the war. They think, oh, well, we won, therefore we don't need to learn anything. We've won. And so what happens is they stop growing. And what happens is they suddenly wake up to a world where they're 20 years behind China and Russia when it comes to hypersonic missiles and electronic warfare, and and there's no way they can catch up. The hegemon victor is always made of clay feet. And it just happens. And in this higher paced society, it doesn't take hundreds of years for Rome to crumble. It might take 100 days. America's in its 100 days. They're going to make this war a long war, as I said they might do in my last Hogue prophecy report. It'll either be violently short or it'll be a lingering war. And Trump seems to, in his mental decline, seems to have forgotten the need to have a decent midterm election. It's almost like he's given up on that, but he's declining very fast. And I've said that I'm not even sure he'll be a president even at the turn at the midterm elections. Well, I think they'll probably drag him through it as much as they can. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if he doesn't last much longer after that, gets impeached or retired. And then J.D. Vance will have a chance to really show he's got a lot of growing to do. But it's one of these weird things about prophecy. I said, I have this feeling that if he grows, if he gets into the job and has to spend 2 years learning how to be president, he's going to be president again because he might turn out, if he pulls from his Appalachian soul the right lessons, he could be a great president. Now, that's saying a lot. It all depends on whether he learns. He may not be a great president, but I see his potential. And it's odd. This happens a lot in this prophecy business. You see, I'm constantly saying, no, not him. I'm very doubtful and skeptical of my prophecies. Like Trump, him? I have to watch him since 1990. Why? I mean, he's a gangster. He's an interesting person in an odd, comical way. But oh, who's this? Who's this little house dwarf that's coming out from behind Boris Yeltsin, who's being introduced to the world as the next standing Russian president? This little Dobby figure. Well, it's Putin. And in both cases, they have become very significant leaders of the world. Because if I gave words to it, the vibe was watch them. They are men of destiny. And that doesn't mean for good or bad. It could be a lot of things. It can be for good. It can be for bad. It can be for other things. But they have proven themselves. Now here they are, kings, the eagle kings of the north, as Nostradamus called them, because their totems were eagles. And Trump and Putin are them. One is going demented. The other is the hope of the world. Even though you folks in the West will go, what? Mark my words. Remember, and Russia is the hope of the world.
Well,
And the source of that prophecy is our greatest prophet in America, the sleeping prophet, Edgar Casey.
okay, so we're at near the end of the show, John, but we already talked about the reading. So if you could remind the audience what the periodicals
Yes.
to sign up, what that encompasses.
Yes, I have the other link is for joining the Hogue Prophecy Report. It's an illustrated e-magazine. It comes out when it needs to come out. Depends. It goes with the flow of history that's being in the making. It's usually at the beginning and the end of a month. It can be sometimes 2 months, but it comes out. And it is amazing. I mean, my readership really constantly are saying, especially as I'm doing a fundraiser now, and I'm getting a lot of feedback more than usual. And the main tenor of what people say is that it's like a rare thing to find such in-depth news, such backstory, such an interesting blend of things that even in the alternative media doesn't happen, where you're blending prophecy with the news and other things. And so it has a very passionate readership. And if it'd be great if you check it out. And the way to check it out is to go to hogueprophecy.com. And and I would also add that if you have a cell phone, uh, and if you haven't done it already, get Adobe Liquid. It's free. It's a free app. You can download it like nothing. And if you want to read me on your cell phone, it will format it, your cell phone, so it's easy to read. If you don't do that, then it's going to be very small print that you're scrolling around with, or you'll have to read it on a larger frame computer. But since we're all so attached to our phones as part of our members, um, do get Adobe Liquid, not just for my things, but you'll be able to read everything easily. I was shocked to see how so many people are scrolling in little bird's feet print on their phones trying to read my stuff. And I say, no, no, you can get this thing. It's free. And on my Hogue Prophecy reports, it's always after the table of contents and the marquee picture and title of each of these magazines. I have in very large print so that you see it. If you're going through the dinky stuff, it'll say, "Hey, get Liquid," and then you can see it, and your eyes won't hurt. So it's if you go online, you will get free samples of like sometimes whole articles. And if you also subscribe to the Hogue Prophecy Bulletin, which is a free newsletter, which you can get if you click on the buttons above the main page of the website, um, you will um, you will get um, you will see free some of my articles, and sometimes I publish them after a while's gone by so you can see them. And a lot of people are going over to subscribe now to it because they find it a unique reading experience. And often, as you notice, maybe in these shows, I do a full spectrum of serious, prophetic, and also comic, because comedy is a very important part of our lives, especially in these times that require that we laugh them off the map. you know. So, um, so yes, so please check it out. Please subscribe. Uh, I'm available for any of you who want a reading. You just say the word, we'll get it done.
So just to remind the audience, in the description of this video and all the videos that I have of John on the channel, just click that link and I'll take you to his website so you can sign up for those periodicals and the readings. So thank you, John, for
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Paul, for making this show. A lot of people really appreciate what you're doing. I get letters all the time, and they're really glad that we're doing these shows. So,
so we'll be doing another one in about 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
All
It'll be a
right.
different world.
It'll be a different one. It always is. Every 2 weeks is.
These days, it's always a different world now.
So tell everybody goodbye so we can shut it down.
Goodbye.
All right.
Auf Wiederschauen.
Thank you everyone for listening and typing in the chat, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.